Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hi, welcome to Economics. Our favorite vegetable is back in the news. It was back in Economics also some time back, and we've talked about onions in the past as well. And it's now in the news because the government has banned the export of onions once again because prices of onions are going up. Is this the correct thing to do? What are the implications of such a decision for consumers, for farmers, for the entire agricultural reform which the government is trying to bring about? We have Professor Patnaik with us who will talk about this. Uh, onions are back in the news.
Ban of onion exports this time. And the problem was the rising prices of onions. In August, there was unseasonal rain, and that seems to have destroyed the crop. So there would be shortages. Now, the unfortunate thing is that when there is a surplus of onions, farmers suffer from the crash in prices that happens. But when there is a rise in the price of onions, then farmers don't benefit or are not able to benefit from the rise in the price of onions. And as a consequence, farmer incomes don't increase as you would expect. So you would expect that if there's high quantity and low price, then you'll get a certain level of income. At the same time, if there were high prices and low quantities, then also you could generate perhaps the same amount of income or sometimes more. So I think while on the one hand, a lot of reforms, the three ordinances which many parties are opposing, have tried to make agricultural markets work. But there is still this foreign trade issue where either in the past price caps used to be imposed, that whenever prices went up, you said, oh, you can't export onions unless the price is below so much. This time, there's a complete ban on export of onions, and actually it has hit the onions that are in transit, because currently there are onions in transit as well. So the main question is, markets are not being allowed to function in the sense of international markets and international trade, which could have benefited farmers. Markets are not allowed to function in terms of signaling of the signals that prices give, so that you can respond with higher demand or lower demand and higher supply. And so how are incomes going to be affected? I mean, one understands the pain of consumers, but at the same time, I think there is this question of, are we going to allow agricultural markets to function, and how well?
So would it be fair to characterize this as the government is more worried about consumers and less worried about farmers, and that has been the traditional way of thinking?
See, there is always a trade-off, because when you try to keep prices low for consumers, then somebody is suffering. In this case, it is farmers who are suffering. And usually when prices go very low, then yes, for some crops there are MSPs and so on. So I wouldn't say that the policy is always tilted in favor of consumers, but when such things are done to prevent prices from rising, then yes, there is a tilt in policy in favor of consumers.
And we have discussed this before also, Ila. Uh, the government is trying to reform agriculture, like we also talked about the ordinances in the past. And now there is I mean, I don't know if knee-jerk is the correct way of, again, characterizing this. This leads to more unhappiness and unrest among farmers. So how do you double their incomes? The government wants to double their incomes, and it is putting these kind of caps.
Yeah, so really the question is, how will your incomes be doubled? So, you could say that quantities will be doubled, okay? Or you could say that prices will go up, or a combination of the two. or, there would of course be diversification, there would be storage and many other things. But in some ways, if you look at the present situation and you say, I will, not allow prices to rise, then in this limited context, we would be trying to double incomes by what? By doubling yields, until the long run thing of crop diversification and high value crops and everything has happened. Then when you talk about doubling, it has to come from either, some prices, some yields, but it can't be that you do not allow prices to rise, because it's very unrealistic to expect that yields are going to double. So if that is not going to happen, then it has to be that some, as we like to call it, terms of trade. Terms of trade move in favor of agriculture as well. So at least in those conditions, when, this is a seasonal crop, the crop was destroyed, there is high demand. Incidentally, this time it seems the demand is coming from Sri Lanka also, whereas earlier, we typically had Middle East and so on as the typical markets for onions. But this time there is demand from Sri Lanka as well. Now, if when international demand rises, when supply has been hit because of the weather, if you don't allow prices to rise, then how would farmers benefit from these sort of conditions? They can't always be in a situation where there is a glut, there's an excess supply, there is a glut, and very often prices become so low that even there they are not able to recover their costs.
It's also not just Sri Lanka. In fact, this morning, the print published a report on how Bangladesh is unhappy about this sudden imposition of the ban, because Bangladesh depends a lot on Indian onions. But there is this talk about inflation, and inflation has been going up. Food price inflation has been going up. But in your column, you talk about which part of food price inflation is going up, and that it's not. It's more about poultry and not really vegetables and fruits. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, so prices of cereals and vegetables haven't gone up so much. Of course, this is not to say that the prices that are going up should continue to go up. Yes, we have to improve supply chains there as well. We have to work hard to make sure that those markets work. If you look at the past many years, you find that some prices rise and then there is a supply response, because in agriculture, actually, the supply response can be very quick. Compare it to something like building bridges or making cars, or where it takes a much longer time to create a factory or put down, even raise the money to make a factory, to build a factory, to hire people, to set management in place. In terms of crops, when prices rise, farmers are far more quickly able to respond to the increase in prices. So actually, what we are seeing now is in some vegetables, there might be, like in onions, there might be difficulties. But we had a lockdown. We had difficult situations where many supply chains got disrupted. So our sense is, so my co-author Radhika and I have worked on this, and our sense is that this is not a situation where there's a runaway increase in prices and you need to start bringing them down by such drastic measures.
And the other issue, the correlated issue, has been I don't know again if you should call it green shoots, but there was a lot of promise people were expecting from the rural economy when the lockdown was happening, and everyone said agriculture and the rural economy is going to be the one which is probably going to push overall growth, because we've seen what the numbers from the other sectors are. And now we have something like this. I mean, the entire rural economy does not depend on onions, but still, this is counterintuitive.
Yes, so the ordinances that were brought now, they're tabled in Lok Sabha and passed there. They certainly are steps towards freeing up agricultural markets. Okay, and that is necessary for creating conditions in the rural economy for higher growth. And we have, I'm not saying that that effect has already happened, but I'm just saying in terms of both the policy framework as well as in terms of the response to COVID, what we saw was that the rural economy bounced back much faster. If you look at employment numbers, CMIE, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy, does these household surveys where they, calculate employment numbers. You see the fastest bounce back in employment in the rural economy compared to urban India. Now, when you look at all that together, you would say that okay, this is a place where we do have the strength and we are bouncing back, and the policy framework needs to be supportive. The policy framework is partly supportive. It is that these changes are being brought in to make the policy framework supportive. But I would just say that when you do things like these bans on and off, so that your supply, you can no longer be a reliable supplier. In addition to the fact that farmer incomes would get hurt and they're not going to get benefit of the high prices and so on, which I've already argued. The other reason for not doing this on-off thing is so that India is a reliable supplier. Now, you don't want to break that because you do want an economy where you want your farm exports to go up. And if farm exports have to go up, if farmers' incomes have to go up, you do want farm exports to go up. And farm exports going up means you want to be a reliable supplier of farm produce. So also in that context, a trade regime which does not support continuation of continuous supplies is counterproductive in that sense.
And it's the entire arbitrariness of it, which you point out in your column, where you say that the government changed the rules on export of onions 17 times in the last 5 years. That is between 2014 and 2019, not the last 5 years. So 17 times. I mean, that is very, very undependable.
Yeah, I think the farmer who produces onions is a very brave farmer because rules keep changing. Sometimes there are gluts whenever prices go up, almost whenever prices go up. The politicization of onion prices that we've seen since the Delhi elections long, long ago, when one state government lost because of onion prices, has meant that the urban consumer seems to almost eat onions as something whose price should be low. But onion is a seasonal crop, and we don't buy mangoes when they're out of season or when the crop is bad. But with onions, somehow the politics of it has become such that the government seems to come under these pressures very quickly and start imposing either price caps, bans, all kinds of measures get taken for which the farmer suffers, and prices are not allowed to rise and the supply response doesn't happen. And this just, it's a problem that has not been solved. And the very fact that it's happened 17 times and still the problem is not solved tells you that this sort of a reaction is not a solution.
So politicization of onion prices is a problem that has not been solved. It continues. It's happened 17 times. It's happened an 18th time. And I'm sorry, it might happen a 19th time. That's the unfortunate part of how policy is dealt with when it comes to farming. We will, of course, be around to tackle it and come back to you and explain it. Thank you for watching this episode of Economics. And I also want to, thank all our subscribers who have taken subscriptions to the print. And if you have not done that, please do visit our site. We have separate subscriptions for our domestic subscribers, that is, subscribers who are in India, and there is a separate section for people who are watching us and reading us outside India. So good journalism needs support, and we need people to subscribe because we all know the kind of economy we are going through and how we need to pay for good journalism. So please do take these subscriptions, and thank you very much for watching Economics, and subscribe to the Print's YouTube channel also, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you.